The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
This morning before I came in here, somebody showed me a TikTok video.
28 weeks pregnant. You know what I'm gonna take? Some Tylenol, Acetaminophen. It's gonna work like a charm, and my baby won't have autism.
That a mother could overwhelm millions of years of maternal instinct to put her baby at risk. And all you have to do is look at the studies, which you and I talked about, is so suggestive that anybody who takes this stuff during pregnancy, unless they have to, is irresponsible. There are 15 rodent studies. Every one of them shows if you give it to the mother, the babies, and particularly the male babies, have profound neurological and behavioral changes. There is a study from Johns Hopkins on cord blood. They divided women into three categories: those who had the least acetaminophen in their cord blood, and those who had the most. The ones with the most had 3.6 times the rate of autism in their children. The middle category had 2.2 times, so it's a dose-related response. And there are dozens of studies that show the countries that use the most have the highest level of autism. Cuba has the lowest level in the world of acetaminophen use, and it has the lowest autism rate in the world. So this is not dispositive. It is not proof. We're doing the studies to make the proof. But in the meantime, the precautionary principle should apply. And any mother who is taking this stuff during pregnancy just to get back at Donald Trump is doing something that is pathological.
Well, good morning, CHD. It's Monday, the 20th of October, 2025. We're live here at CHD. In a minute, I'm going to be talking to Karl Jablonowski from our science department. And then after that, Isabella Yon and Cathy Meehan will be talking about pediatricians. Do we need them? So stay tuned for that. All right. Good morning, Karl. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, that's really disturbing. I can't imagine any viewer watching right now will feel differently. I mean, to see that woman doing that, I don't understand how, even just a question, even if you don't like Donald Trump or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., at least do your research, because Tylenol itself said at some point that these products are not recommended for pregnant people. So if you don't like them, at least believe Tylenol itself telling you that. And that woman is pregnant and chugging it down.
Right. And I often think of the Surgeon General's warning against pregnant women consuming alcohol when I see that clip. That was put into place in 1981 during the Reagan administration. And if you can imagine a pregnant woman drinking alcohol just to spite the politicians claiming their child is not going to have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, I mean, it's rather ludicrous. And I think our society really dropped the ball on an appropriate response to TikTok videos like that. So Tylenol was first used in 1890 for fever and pain, and that's a long time ago, and it's been considered safe. In historical context, that's about when physicians started washing their hands. So it has really been with us for a very long time. And, I bring up fetal alcohol spectrum disorder because the mechanisms for how we think Tylenol can injure are a little parallel with how alcohol can injure a fetus. They're both spectrum disorders. They're both caused by drugs that deal with pain. They even include some of the same pathways for detoxing. And a pathway is just a set of enzymes that when your body is exposed to a drug, you need some enzymes at the right place at the right time to metabolize them into something safer and either utilize them or expel them. And with acetaminophen, it's always a good idea if you have multiple pathways, because there's always a chance that one of them will get occupied, meaning the enzymes that act on that particular pathway are busy doing something else, and you need a different pathway, and that's just biological safety. And an example of pathways getting blocked up, grapefruit clogs some of the detoxing pathways that we use for pharmaceuticals, and which is why grapefruit consumption is sometimes contraindicated by some of the medications. But when we talk about acetaminophen for a healthy adult, most of our acetaminophen, it's over 50%, gets metabolized down a pathway called glucuronidation. About 30 to 45% goes down a sulfation pathway. 5% gets expelled unmodified, and about 5 to 10% goes down the pathway that we're really concerned about, which creates the free radicals and depletes the glutathione. Now, there was a pretty great study that looked at the primary pathway that we use to detoxify acetaminophen. And what that study did was looked at how those enzymes were created in the early years of life, at even in fetus, and at 20 weeks gestation, which is when Dr. Vu was taking that Tylenol, there is no glucuronidation pathway for acetaminophen in an infant, in a fetus. So all of that acetaminophen that gets into the cord blood, which is the baby's blood, has to be dealt with by the baby through some other means. And the main concern is that spills over and into the part which would create the oxidative stress, which is more likely the cause of disease. And one more point I'd like to just push out: we don't really know how acetaminophen works. We don't know how it dulls the pain. We have a theory, but the most sobering moment I had was, when someone is pushing a product on you saying it's perfectly safe, and then you read in the package insert, mechanism of action unknown. If you don't even know how it works, how can you possibly know it's safe? But we have a theory of how acetaminophen works, that it interferes with prostaglandins and can dull pain and mitigate fever, but we don't really know for sure. And when the TikTok videos of doctors taking Tylenol, they should know metabolic pathways for drugs. They must know to get an MD, and it's pretty alarming that they would just contraindicate this warning. And just in historical context, this warning, in my opinion, came 17 years late. This press conference that Donald Trump and Secretary Kennedy hosted, we're in the midst of an autism epidemic of unknown cause that is doubling every 10 years. There is a Schultz study of 2008, which was a survey study, so not the greatest source of evidence, but it was still a survey study that presented the evidence for harm from acetaminophen manifesting in autism. And how much evidence do you need to be like, we don't know what causes autism, we should probably look at this? But we didn't. And here we are 17 years later, and we finally get that press conference where I think it's the first press conference where a sitting president mentioned the word autism since probably before I was born. But no, these are interesting times we're going through with pretty interesting dynamics.
Carl, can we just talk for a second? Because I've just come back from England, okay, and everyone over there is saying, "Oh, you guys are crazy talking about acetaminophen causing autism." And I have to say, I have never done an interview with someone who just said my child got autism from acetaminophen. But my question is this: I know it plays a part. First of all, my statement is this: I know it plays a part because every single person I've interviewed, it's it's the same story as we've talked about before. You take the Tylenol, you take the vaccines, you take the Tylenol again because you have to take it before and afterwards, then the antibiotics. I think all of those, I think the antibiotics play a part in it as well because our kids, it's really interesting to me, our kids don't just get autism from the first vaccine. Well, for the first vaccine, it does some damage, it keeps doing more damage, but the whole pattern of, as I said, Tylenol, vaccination, Tylenol, antibiotics, repeat the first year. That to me, that combination is what it is. And for Billy, just that last trigger, that MMR was just the last thing to finish him off. It was a slow building up of bam, you're gone. But so my question is, when people say to us, you guys are crazy, acetaminophen does not cause autism, what are we actually saying here that acetaminophen does in its journey towards autism?
Creates oxidative stress. I mean, ultimately, that's the problem. But I hear you. When I first read William Parker's study that showed that acetaminophen was, integral to autism, I'm like, no, that's crazy conspiracy theory. And then, I continued reading, and the stars aligned, and acetaminophen for some subset of the population causes extreme oxidative stress, and it's infuriatingly difficult to study because acetaminophen is considered safe the world round. We don't record when we give it to people. We don't record when we've taken it. There have been studies that tried to look at it, and when pregnant women were asked if they were taking any drugs, and they said no, but then they were asked, again about Tylenol, and they're like, oh yeah. And it was a huge portion of the population that does not consider, Tylenol as a drug. It's just something so ubiquitous and so safe. And so at CHD Science, we can't measure Tylenol consumption in the medical record systems that we have access to. But what we can do is identify reasons why you would take Tylenol, or you would be recommended to take Tylenol for children, and those correlate pretty strongly with the manifestation of autism spectrum disorder and other neurodevelopmental issues.
Yeah, can we talk for a second about the CHD Science Department? Because Brian Hooker was talking to us about, and I want you to clear this up because I got a little bit confused. Pregnant women definitely should not take Tylenol, but it's not as bad as giving Tylenol to your newborn baby or your young baby, because that is where the real problem is. Is that right or is that wrong?
I believe that is right. A pregnant woman, a healthy one, still has an operating liver, still has detoxification pathways of an adult, can still process most of the acetaminophen. However, when Kennedy said it's in the cord blood, the cord blood is the baby's blood. That acetaminophen is in the baby's blood. And so it crosses the placental barrier, and then the fetus has to deal with it. And they don't have that glucuronidation pathway. It has to go down one of the others. But when you administer Tylenol to a neonate, someone just born, like you would during after a circumcision procedure, they have to process all of that Tylenol all by themselves. They don't have the mother and the umbilical cord as a means of support for processing this drug. They have to do it all by themselves, and their detoxification pathways are not operating at an adult level, not even past 2 years old. That study that Lou pulled up, at 24 months old, the children still did not have detoxification pathways consistent with adults.
Carl, acetaminophen, we always talk about Tylenol, but I mean, I don't know if you know the answers, but it's in other products as well, right? It's not
Oh
just
yeah,
Tylenol. Do
it's
we,
not just Tylenol. It's in quite a few products. Um, it's mostly used to mitigate pain and fevers. But there are a whole host of other products that use acetaminophen.
yeah, and it's really hard for the young mother as well, when their child's screaming in pain, normally after a vaccine, by the way. What do you do and maybe mothers to be could do a segment on, what do you do when you're pregnant and you have say a tooth abscess or something? I mean, how do you deal with pain as a pregnant mother and also as a new mother who that is scared? And the doctors will say, take Tylenol. The amount of parents I've interviewed, they were told Tylenol, Tylenol, Tylenol.
Right. I, I think allopathic medicine should branch out to include and support other means of pain management, because they've been using Tylenol as the crutch for pain for quite a while, and it seems to be fairly harmful.
So, Carl, if you had to stand in front of a pregnant mother who was arguing with you about acetaminophen, what is the crux of the issue here? How much damage can acetaminophen do to your child and you as a pregnant mother? What would be your summary of this?
I mean, ultimately, we don't know. When Dr. Vu took that Tylenol and said, "My baby won't have autism," she doesn't know. She can't fast forward 10 years to see her child free and clear of autism. And in fact, since it's been expanding every 10 years, when we say there's a 1 in 31 chance of autism, that's from a birth cohort of 2014. It's quite likely that a child born now would have a chance of 1 in 15. And that's based on 22 years of the Autism and Developmental Disability Monitoring Program. But there are quite a few unknowns, and we need to put effort into figuring out the answers, and we need to do it right away.
You know what, Carl? I was just suddenly came to my mind that when I have met some mothers whose children were not vaccinated, they may have had vitamin K, but they were not vaccinated, and they do have autism. I wonder if they gave Tylenol, to the unvaccinated child. I mean, maybe that was where our Tylenol stories are coming. What else do you think can cause autism? Because we know it's not just vaccines.
No, it's not just vaccines. Anything that can increase the oxidative stress of the baby or the fetus can be a contributing component to developing autism. But it's a pretty complicated disease, and we've been looking pretty hard and haven't figured out the answers. That's not to say that we can't figure out the answers. But yeah, the neural inflammation that occurs are as a byproduct of oxidative stress not being able to be handled appropriately.
And Carl, do you know this? Do you know why it's boys more than girls? Because it really is.
There are a few theories. I'm not sure why. I've come across two papers that are pretty interesting postulates. One is the difference in prostaglandins that are expressed in boys versus girls, and that plays a role in helping them detoxify things. And there's another glutathione peroxidase 3, which is it's a marker that is, I believe, more prevalent in girls than boys. But no, it's a pretty complicated problem.
It certainly is. And I know that our science department are working really hard behind the scenes and just unraveling all of this. And we're so grateful to you, Carl, for coming on this morning and as always, educating us. I do think all homeschoolers should have their children watch Carl every time he comes on, because I think it's the best education you can get. You're always educating us. Thank you, Carl, for being here. and for the work you do.
Thanks for having me, Polly.
Of course. Well, now listen, we're going to go to Mothers to Be Now segment. You're going to want to listen to this. It's exciting as well as informative. So I'm going to hand the show over to Isabella Yon now.
Good morning, CHD TV. My name is Isabella Yon, and welcome to our Mothers to Be segment, where we chat all things from preconception all the way through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, and that precious first year of life. And I'm so excited today to be joined by the lovely Cathy Meehan from Mindset Kids. We have a packed few minutes talking about pediatricians and some very exciting new options that I'm sure you will all be very interested in. So welcome, Cathy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Bella. It is such a privilege to be here because you guys are leading the fight and you're also leading in solutions. And I just hope God continues to bless you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. And we're so excited to have you. For those of you who don't know you yet, I know many people here do, but for those who don't know you, could you just share a little bit about you and your background and what kind of brought you into this world of children's health and advocacy and things like that?
So I blame my late husband, Jim Meehan, MD, for bringing me into this fight. So just a quick history. My husband, Jim, and I were college sweethearts. We were married for 34 years, had 5 kids, 7 grandkids, all of that. And, he was a warrior when it came to medical freedom and just, exposing the corruption that's really in the pharmaceutical world. And it was, we were really in this fight for about a decade now. And especially after Vaxxed came out, Jim and I attended one of the premieres in Oklahoma City. And when we walked out of that, I mean, we were changed. And Jim got online. He had a video of a medical doctor himself, just being appalled at the vaccine industry and everything. And that went viral. And because he was an independent physician, he was really kind of able to speak out. And, it just started this journey. And my background, I was a pharmaceutical rep. And so actually I always tell people when I got out of college a year ahead of Jimmy, I went to work in the pharmaceutical industry. And I say I got my Ph.D, put hubby through med school. So, I mean, that was a journey in itself. And so we were kind of pretty indoctrinated at that time. And again, vaccines were safe and effective. That's what Jim believed. That's what I thought. But as we were, getting deeper into that side, it was really easy to see some of the corruption. And I remember I would come home from work and I would tell Jim, I was like, wow, a lot of these physicians are not very smart. And what I mean by that is they weren't critical thinkers. A lot of them were just kind of like robots. And I'm talking to you guys, this is like 35 years ago when the doctors would come out and they could memorize symptoms and spit out a pharmaceutical. And really, as a pharmaceutical rep, that's what we taught them. We're like, here's the symptoms, and this is when you need this pharmaceutical, product. But nobody was really critical thinkers. And part of the shift that Jim had was he was a critical thinker. So he could think outside of the box. He wasn't, swayed by the pharmaceutical lunches or the drug reps or anything like that. Anytime he was approached with a study or anything supporting a drug, he always dug deep in to find out, really what's really behind this, who's supporting the study, what are the biases in the study. And so that's one of the things that I like to talk about is, that's really what the pharmaceutical industry wants right now. They want robots that can spit out, a pharmaceutical drug. And then if you have side effects from that, they're going to put another one on top of that. And they're not really taught to be critical thinkers. And I also firmly believe that medical schools, they're not looking for critical thinkers when they get applications for students to come in. They are much more satisfied with what I call those robots. And that's really what we have. One of the things I like to talk about is really the number of pediatricians that we have today. I always say, do we really need pediatricians? Well, yes, we do need pediatricians. We need that specialty. However, I would love to just give you a little bit of data. So over the past like 30 to 40 years, we've seen the growth of the pediatric population. So I'm talking, ages 0 to 17. So back in like 1990, we were at about 64 million. And then you look at the numbers around 2020 and we're up to 73 million. Okay, that's about a 14% growth just in the pediatric population. Okay, that seems normal, that seems fine. But let's think about the growth of the number of pediatricians. So if you're going to look back, around 1990 again, there's like maybe 25,000, 30,000. It really depends on where you gather your data. And then you go up to 2025 and you're going to find like 60,000 plus. And that's not even counting all the subspecialties and everything else that is focusing on pediatrics. And that growth is like well over 140%. So you've got this growth in the pediatric population. You've got this huge growth in pediatric providers. So Bella, what do you think the growth in chronic disease should be if we have so many pediatricians and so many specialists?
Yeah, I was going to say it's fascinating hearing that data on the growth of the pediatric community and then also comparing it to the explosion of chronic illness that we see now in children, even things like allergies and eczema and asthma, behavioral disorders to obviously more chronic severe conditions. And it's fascinating when you line those up side by side. So from your perspective, what do you think is driving this?
Well, I mean, let's talk about real quick. So we're talking, back in the 1990s, chronic disease was around 12%. And you look at it now and it's well over 50%. It is growing. It is out of control. And we have all of these pediatricians. So, I mean, what is going on with that? And yeah, what is driving it? Well, we know a few things that are driving it. One thing that if people haven't seen it yet, the inconvenience study, thank you very much, the Henry Ford Health System. We've suspected for a long time that vaccinations have something to do with chronic disease and all of those, all of us, what I call warriors who are in this medical freedom fight. I mean, we know it's not just one thing, right? But we do know that there is some correlation between the number of vaccines and the growth in chronic disease. So that's really, let's start looking at that. And that's exactly what the Henry Ford study did. Over 18,000 patients literally compared vaccinated against unvaccinated. Plus there's a lot of data out there. I mean, we've got the books, Vax Facts, and just so many things out there. So we can look at that. We can also look at, there's obviously the EMF exposure is out there nowadays. We've got the chemicals in our food supply. We have glyphosate. There are just so many things. We have inactivity of children. There are so many things that can, cause encephalopathy and all of these chronic diseases that we have. So let's, one of the things I like to do is we've got all this data. What do we do with it? And what are some of the solutions that we have? I also want to touch a point on pharmaceutical industries, their influence and the financial bias of pediatricians, because that's one thing that I don't know if everybody actually recognizes, that the pediatrician's office today, if they are administering vaccinations, that can comprise anywhere from like 20 to 50% of their revenue. And I mean, and that they say, well, insurance pays for it, or they have administration fees. There are just so many things. And then they also have like pay for performance from certain from certain insurance providers. We know that Blue Cross Blue Shield does a pay for performance. We know Aetna does a pay for performance. So if you take away vaccinations from a pediatrician's office, it is likely that they are not going to be able to support their staff and continue. And one quote I found, which I really liked, and it kind of hits the point, was that pediatricians aren't forced to vaccinate, but missing these metrics can mean missing out on significant bonuses. So I want people to understand that when you refuse a vaccination at your doctor's office, and we hear it all the time now that they are literally firing patients for not vaccinating or not following the CD schedule to a T. And the reason you're getting fired is because they are going to lose out on their bonus. I mean, and it just appalls me that physicians aren't critical thinkers, and they're not even looking outside of the box on, why would you not want to vaccinate? I mean, come on, people, doctors, read a package insert. I mean, parents know more about what's in a vaccine, risks, than most pediatricians. I mean, I saw Jim debate pediatricians all the time, and guess who won every time? My husband Jim won those debates, and it's just something that's got to stop. And I think it's really difficult for any pediatrician to actually come out and say, "Hey, I was wrong." They're very, very, very few of them are going to do that. So, so one of the things I like to talk about is, what is a solution and what do we do, right? So my husband Jim, we had what was it, March of 23, we all sat down at the conference table and we were like, what can we do as an alternative to the common pediatric well visits, what's going on? And really, I tell people God has led us through this whole entire journey. But one of the things that was very important to Jim, being a critical thinker, was education. It's like, how do we educate people? How do we take control of your health and your children's health? And that was so important to him. And, we had an adult, well, we still do. We have an adult clinic. And one of the things was the Meehan mindset. And so I'm going to start with that, because mindset is an acronym. It stands for microbiome, inflammation, nutrition, detoxification, sleep, exercise, and total hormone balance. So we focus on those 7 pillars of health, and we're like, okay, well, let's educate parents on that also. And then the other thing was, we like natural, holistic remedies. Pharmaceuticals are going to be like the last resort. But Bella, what did your grandma do when you guys had like a fever? Did she run you to the emergency room?
No, definitely not. And my mother didn't even do that. I think even, 25, 30 years ago, it's even wasn't like it is today, where everyone is panicking and freaking out at the tiniest symptom.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we're like, okay, so how do we educate? So it started with a natural health guide. Looks like this.
Love it.
And in the natural health guide, it was written by our naturopath, contributions from my husband, Jim, and also Dr. Paul Thomas, who many of you know, because we met him on our journey through the whole COVID thing, talking about, the corruption in the medical world. But the natural health guide is really, it was our starting point for educating parents on what to do for non-emergent things like cough and cold, ear infections, sore throats, sunburns, all of those. And it lists natural, holistic remedies, and then when to call the doctor. Because we understand that a lot of parents, especially the new moms, they have lots of questions. And so what we do is we provide resources. We do webinars. We have a community Facebook group. We do newsletters. We push out information on, why we don't fear diseases. That's another thing. And it's all based on education. And then we provide a pediatrician, a like-minded pediatrician, for when you need that backup. So let's say your child has had a cough for a few days. You've tried some of the natural remedies. It wasn't working. So you call our Mindset Kids and speak to one of our care coordinators, and then she'll set you up with a telemedicine appointment with one of our functional medicine providers. And what we do is we also provide each family, we call it a handy dandy home kit. Looks like this. I love our graphics, just an FYI. And every box comes with your natural health guide. So you'll have that to view. We provide you a few tools. Everyone should have a pulse ox if they don't have a pulse ox in their home. Of course, a little digital thermometer, that helps. I always say you can measure your child's circumference and length. So if you want, to record the history of your child's health and everything. We'll walk you through how to do that. Of course, a fun little notebook. This is more like a fun thing, but my favorite thing is a smartphone otoscope. So you take this and you can literally see inside the ear canal. You can take pictures, you can take video, you can also use it up the nose, down the throat, or like if you have a skin lesion, you can take videos and send those over. And that way, everything is in your file, in your electronic medical records for when you have your physician's appointment. But it's, you know, it was one of those things we were like, we need to really get back to the basics and just teach parents to be more confident in caring for their kids. So let's provide the tools, let's provide the education, and just, really get back to basics. And then I don't know if you want to talk about cost. The other thing was like, how do we pay for this? What do we do? And really, Jim's big thing was he wanted things to be affordable. And we debated a lot at that conference table about how much we would charge and everything like that. And I always say, it was a God number that came to my head. And so our home kit, you join us for $49.99 and you get the home kit. And then after that, it's $24.99 for your entire family or your kids, whether you have 1 to 10 kids. I have yet to have anybody with 11 kids. I'll deal with that when somebody with 11 kids shows up. And then all of your telemedicine visits are going to be free when you talk to the doctors. Now, if you have chronic illness, there's what we try to do is we put you with a like-minded provider in your location, so that if you want some in-person appointments, or if you're in Oklahoma, you can obviously come to us. That's where our brick and mortar is. But we are also call to action. If you know any functional medicine pediatricians, we are constantly hiring more. And so I would just appreciate, somebody to shout out that way and get a hold of me for pediatricians also.
Amazing. Cathy, thank you so much for running through. Full disclosure to everyone watching, my kids are signed up for Mindset Kids. I am, again, a mum of young kids, and I actually took my first to a pediatrician one time. My mum told me, don't do it. But again, you have a baby and you kind of panic and you think, gosh, I have to do this. Anyway, I went and I never went back because, like Cathy touched on, big part of Mindset Kids is education, and I received absolutely no education, even answers to my questions when I went to a conventional pediatrician. I was waiting in the waiting room for about an hour with a screaming newborn, went in, they weighed him, asked if I wanted a vaccine, and I said no, and then that was it, and I received no informed consent about that vaccine if I was to be considering it. And it was very much kind of dismissive and not a positive experience. And so I never went back. And I was extremely excited to learn about Mindset Kids a few months ago, because again, I don't think there's anything like this out there that provides the big component of education to make me as a mama feel empowered, but then also have that resource if, for example, my kid got a weird spider bite and I'm thinking, what do I do with this? And I would love a professional opinion. I think it provides a great bridge and a gap for mamas looking for something different. So thank you so much for running through. I wanted to ask you about this because I know we'll get questions about it. Can we quickly talk about well child visits? A lot of mamas are told that they are essential, but then there are many mamas also starting to question that. What is your honest take? And does Mindset provide that, or do you feel like it's just not needed?
Well, I don't think the traditional wellness visits are needed because those are literally designed as a vaccine appointment. So, but I do believe in monitoring your child's health. So we actually have a few I don't want to call it a workbook, but kind of like worksheets so that you can, like I said, you can measure your child's head circumference and length and take vitals, and we can help walk you through those so that you've got a record of it. And I also want to say that, when you get a call with the pediatrician, one of our pediatricians, their job is either to reassure the patient, treat, or transfer you, because we have had cases where we're like, yeah, I think you need to go to the emergency room. And that's kind of like that backup where a lot of parents, I always say, like, you want a pediatrician, but you don't want a pediatrician, but you have a question, but nobody can answer it. And so we hope to fill that gap. And because, like I said, we have sent people to the emergency room where they were hesitant to go, but we're like, no, you probably should go to the emergency room. And, and then we tell you, what you can say when you get to the emergency room. Because you don't want to be bullied. That's really, we want to protect one another. We want to have that community. We want to have that support. And, that's really our goal.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. And you mentioned the word bullying, and we did actually have a question from a mama who is local to me here and said they can't find a pediatrician without either, not being accepted at all because of the choices they want to make for their children, or if they do find someone to accept them, the bullying is so intense, it almost makes her second guess what she feels like is the best decision for her kids. So this is probably an obvious question, but Mindset Kids, is it safe to say that mamas can feel reassured that they're not going to get any kind of pushback for any medical decisions they're trying to make for their child?
No, part of being telemedicine is that we can't offer vaccinations, so we're never going to bully you into that. However, if you are a mom that is seriously considering vaccinations, we are going to help direct you into an area where a lot of the information might be censored. And we'll even talk one-on-one on the phone and walk you through things so that you have true informed consent of risks, benefits, and alternatives. So that's really, again, we want you to be the scientist of your health and your child's health. And education is how number one, we stand up to bullies and we just empower parents. That's our goal.
Amazing. I love it so much, Cathy. Thank you for this amazing work that you do. It's so exciting to be a part of it. So we always end our show with asking people if you could say one thing to a new mom, maybe it's advice or encouragement, someone expecting their first baby, perhaps a mother-to-be, what would you tell her?
Oh, definitely go with your gut intuition. I mean, the way God wired us to be mothers and, especially like new moms, because you really have no idea what to expect. But when you have that little baby, you are going to do absolutely everything in your power to protect that little bitty human and and the other thing is never put them down. That was my thing. I never put my kids down. I mean, it's kind of, I would hold them today. They're all in their 20s and 30s. I would still hold them today, but mother your intuition and fight for your baby.
I love it. Thank you, Cathy, so much. So just to close, how can our mamas find Mindset Kids, sign up, ask questions? Where can we go?
You bet. So you can go to mindset-kids.com. There's the homepage. You can peruse through that and get information, or you can go straight to the Say Yes to Empowerment or Join Now. There's several places where you can click. It's a very easy way to join. And then once you join, we send you your home kit. You'll get some welcome emails and, a support line, and we are there for you.
Amazing. Cathy, thank you so, so much for joining us today and for all the amazing work that you do at Mindset.
You bet. Thanks, Bella.
And thanks so much to you guys for tuning in and hearing about Mindset. Again, my kids are a part of this amazing organization. I cannot recommend it enough. It's been such a game changer, and it is so new and profound in today's society, and I couldn't recommend it more. So definitely go and check it out. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Mothers to Be.
Tell us your name.
My name is Lisa.
Lisa, and is this a story about you or your children?
About my son.
Your son, okay.
Yes.
All right, how many children do you have?
I have 2 children. My son is 10 and I have a daughter who's 8.
Okay.
My son's autistic, my daughter is fine.
Okay, so well, I think the interesting thing is to establish is when you were pregnant, were you an anti-vaxxer?
No, I didn't question it like many, like yourself. My son was born in 2006. And obviously the whole Dr. Wakefield thing had been in the news, and I did question it. I was wondering whether I could have the 3 separate vaccines which you could pay for. But when I suggested that to my GP and anyone I talked to about it, at the nurse, even at the time when she was doing it, giving the MMR to my son, it was constantly that it was safe and that I was being silly, and it had all been disproved. And so I believed them. So I should say, prior to having the vaccine, my son was born by cesarean section because it was an emergency. And so he didn't, I think his gut flora was, he didn't get the full flora at that time. And then very soon after, I was really wanted to breastfeed. And I had 2 bouts of mastitis. And so he was still very young, a few weeks old, and the doctors gave me antibiotics for that. And both times I was, are you sure this is okay for him to have the antibiotics in the breast milk? And again, reassured that everything's fine. So I believe already at this very young stage, he had, a weak gut flora. And then he was developing normally, reached all his milestones. He spoke really young. I have friends with boys the same age, and everyone commented how young he spoke. And he had a vocabulary of about 100 words. And at 15 months he walked, everything was fine. Then in October 2007, he was 13 months old, he had the MMR. And unlike the other stories I've heard, there wasn't an immediate...
Was it just the MMR?
Prior to that, he'd had, we live in London, so they have the BCG at like 6 weeks old. Then he had the usual DTaP and all the 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, he had that. Then on that day, he had the MMR, just the MMR.
Only the MMR?
Yes,
Oh,
I believe so. And I can't say for sure, actually. I should check the red book. But I was just being,
maybe it's a combination or
yeah, it might have been.
How old is he?
He's 10 now. So this was in 2007. So I can check that. But I know that was the day that he had that. And there wasn't any immediate illness or anything after that. But this was October. By January, however, we went away on a holiday, and we had a photographic session done with him. And he was really unresponsive and acting strange and getting really irritated, and we was really noticed that. And that weekend while we were away, he had really bad bout of gastroenteritis, which when we got home, we had to take him to A&E because he was so sick and he was like a skeleton. They observed him, and then we were sent home. He finally stopped vomiting and having diarrhea, and we went home. But his gut never really recovered from that. So I think the previous time from having antibiotics as a baby, then the MMR, and then this. From that moment on, he just started to definitely become less, more in a bubble and less responsive. And he would wake from his daytime nap and he would just scream every day. He would only nap for a very short time, and he would scream really horrendously for about an hour, inconsolable. And I would ask doctors and health visitors, and no one had any answers to what that could be. At this time, now we're 2008, his sister arrives, and he was just inconsolable about her arrival, which at first I thought, he's just jealous and he's put out because this little girl has turned up. But it was unnaturally so. He was clingy, really upset, distraught. And then from that point, he just seemed to deteriorate. He just got more and more in a bubble. He wouldn't answer to his name. His speech, which had been really, really good, just deteriorated. So that by the age of 3, he was completely non-verbal. And now he's 10 and he still is the same. And then just all skills were lost, and it just carried on until now. He's 10. He has always been in mainstream. But he is so behind academically. He has huge sensory issues. He has sensory processing disorder as well. Very fight-flight mode all the time, very super anxious. But he's always suffered with this really bad gut.
Have you cleared that up now?
Well, now we've worked on that for years. We did the GAPS diet, and we saw a nutritionist, and we did lots of stuff to, he's on a gluten-free, casein-free diet. It's been on that for years. That helped. And going casein-free really helped make him a bit more alert. But he was getting really severe pain and screaming. And so we went to Great Ormond Street when he was 8, and he had the exploratory test done. And they said they couldn't see anything. But he had hyperplasia and inflammatory bowel. But a lot of autistic children have that, and they couldn't explain why, and that was it, and I was sent away.
So basically, they found inflammatory. That's interesting.
Yeah.
She said that. But then they said a lot of autistic children.
Yeah.
So in other words, that's normal because your child's got autism.
Autism, and there was there was nothing they could do to help him with the pain, and so that I was sent away. At that point, my friend Dawn, who you've met, who had moved to America, and she is vaccine damaged herself, and she started a program with a doctor called Dr. Yasko out there, which is a epigenetics program. Mm-hmm. So I started. My son had his DNA done, and we started to do using supplements this program. And she, first of all, she saw that he is very highly intoxicated. He has high levels of aluminium, mercury, lead, arsenic, everything. And she could tell. We started to work on the gut, and she found that he actually had Helicobacter pylori, which is like a very prolific gut bacteria which causes real pain, which was what we would have, why we went to Great Ormond Street a couple of years before. And that would cause the hyperplasia, and we've been working on that, and we've nearly killed that now, and his gut is miles better. And now we're still working on the detoxifying, working on the methylation, so that he can detoxify himself, and that's where we're at. So he's
you've got a daughter.
Yes.
Now what's she had?
She's had the same, because
all of the same.
Yeah, because by the time I realised what had happened to him, it was too late. She'd already had her. She's very close. She's only 20 months younger than him. So, but she doesn't. She does have a weak gut, and. But other than that, she's fine. I'm lucky, I guess. But she didn't have all the antibiotics as a baby that he had. I don't know if that made a difference. Obviously, boys are more susceptible. I don't know. I try to find these answers. There's no doctors here to get help. I tried to go back to Great Ormond Street to tell them what I'd found.
You need to stay out of Great Ormond Street.
Yeah.
You really need to stay out of all these places.
Well, yeah, I mean...
specialist doctors, even if you have to go to America and find one.
Yeah, well, I'm doing this program with Dr. Yasko from America, and we are seeing results, but really I need, that's what I'm desperate to try and find a doctor here in London that I can see.
Well, don't settle for the white coats, because they're just going to make your boy sick.
Yeah, so, I have a brilliant homeopath, and we're working at getting all the vaccines out homeopathically, so we've done the program, we're working through that. I'm just trying to strengthen his own methylation, but at the moment, there are improvements. He's not in so much pain, but he's still very distressed. He's actually he was at mainstream school. That hasn't worked out, so he's actually at home with me now for the last month, and I'm trying to get him into school, so it's...
Well, in America, homeschooling's all the thing, and they are bright kids.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I'm cut. It's very stressful. So, I'm just hoping that with good diet, as you say, keep...
What's your son called?
Sonny.
Periscope, remember Sonny, we're going to write Sonny's name on the bus.
Actually, Dawn has already wrote his name. I don't want him to be doubled up. He's 2,800 and something, but yeah, Dawn already did that for me. Yeah. So, yes, that's where we're at. But it's just amazing that you guys are doing what you're doing to draw attention to it.
Isn't it?
And that you're not going mad.
It's the same story. We always said it, but coming in and actually hearing it.
I know. I've already seen the film because my friend sent me the DVD, but watching it again and just hearing that everything is just my life and what's happened to us. And the sad thing, the most annoying thing that drives me mad is that it didn't have to, it's awful that it happened to the kids, that it happened to. But these children, like my son, at that age, it should never have happened because it should have been picked up at the time, in 2007. But now, like you say, it's just knowledge of parents knowing that they need to be informed and make that decision.
Well, your story's made a difference.
I hope so.
And thank you.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement.
Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll of course hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.